Good afternoon and welcome to this legal insight session run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session specifically focuses on the governance, risk and compliance obligations for community service organisations and charities in terms of the reporting obligations that you need to meet purely from a legal governance, risk and compliance perspective. With that said, we're going to make this a hands-on session. Our law firm specialises in this space. There's been a number of different rule changes and specific obligations that agencies need to meet. And as part of these sessions that we are going to be running over the next couple of weeks, we're going to focus on key governance, risk and compliance areas that your agency needs to both know about and also demonstrate compliance with. We do have a set of legal resources that you can use from week to week. It is an open set of resources that your agency will get access to after today's webinar. And this includes the recording of this session as well too, and also the slides that we are using. We do encourage you to use the chat bar if you like as well too, to ask any questions that you might have. And as we move through the short session this morning, we are going to keep it fairly tight in terms of the specific requirements and details of what your agency needs to meet. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So today's agenda, we're going to look at some of the overview of the governance, risk and compliance obligations that agencies need to meet. This information we have taken directly from the different regulatory agencies. We do acknowledge ASIC, we do acknowledge the ATO, we do acknowledge the ACNC websites and the likes, specifically as we have taken information directly off these different regulatory agency sites with the idea that we continue to build upon some of the directions that these agencies are providing and assist you to fill in some of the gaps that you may have come across already. So straight up, as we like to do with all of our legal insight sessions, we have a list of recommendations that we do put up, and this is really designed to show you where we are actually heading today as well too. So obviously, review the governance standards is the key part of this. Access the Gemba 360 dashboard and conduct a self-assessment and access the resources that we are providing you with today. That said, in terms of the resources that your agency will get access directly to, as I mentioned at the start, our law firm specializes in governance, risk and compliance works, especially over the last two COVID, or what I will call COVID years, where governance, risk and compliance has come to the forefront, particularly through the lens of the pandemic. That said, you will get access to an open compliance dashboard. It is specific for your agency to be able to use. It is run, managed, and operated by our law firm, Kaizen Synergy. When you log in to this dashboard, and you should all have access to it as well too, you'll be able to use your email address and we'll send you a temporary password. You can jump in and you will see this dashboard. This is where we park all of the legal resources for you to be able to access. In particular, we will show you the governance, risk and compliance checklist. If I simply click on this icon, and I just repeat, this is an open seat license for your agency for you to be able to access. And once you click on that particular icon, where we are heading to is we have summarized the legal information and requirements that your agency needs to meet. And we will come back to this particular checklist as well. What you also do have access to, and we will continue to add to this over the next few weeks, is a policies and templates register as well. And you will find that there are specific topics in here, and quite simply you can click on these, open these up, and access the specific documents that you may look at. They are all in essentially Word documents. So when you do click on it, you'll be able to access these, and there are all template legal documents that you can use. Simply click on Enable Editing, and you can, let me bring this up here, you can and you will see simply insert agency name, and if you wanted to update your own agency name, you can simply cover all of those and replace it, search and replace, and you are away. But we will come back to that later in the session, but it is the dashboard that we will refer to, and you get access to be able to access all of these resources as you like. So let's go back. What is the key requirements that your agency needs to meet? Well, going back to the governance overview, let's put this into context. Firstly, from a charities and community services organization, there are a number of standards that your agency needs to meet. We are going to move through these fairly quickly, but we will return to these over the next few weeks to unpack the compliance obligations and show you, importantly, how to meet these effectively and efficiently as well. And we've got template policy docs for yourselves to use. So essentially, there are a number of key governance standards that your agency needs to comply with. Essentially, standard 1 talks about purposes and not-for-profit nature. Standard 2 talks about accountability to members. Standard 3 talks about compliance with Australian laws. Standard 4 talks about suitability of responsible persons. Standard 5 talks about duties of responsible people. And Standard 6 talks about maintaining and enhancing public trust and confidence in the Australian not-for-profit sector. So when we go through these, what do these essentially mean? Well, essentially, under Standard 1, your charity must be a not-for-profit and work towards its charitable purpose. It must be able to demonstrate this and provide information about its public purposes as well too. Standard 2 talks about a charity that has members must take reasonable steps to be accountable and to raise and to its members and provide them with adequate opportunity to raise concerns about how the charity is governed. Standard 3 talks about a charity must not commit a serious offence such as fraud under any Australian law or breach a law that may result in penalty of up to 60 penalty units or more. We have had a question which I will just jump to, and it is important. Agree that, Sharon, thank you for your question where you've just raised, we are registered with ORIC as a parent company. Our subsidiaries are registered with ASIC. Can future sessions include references to ORIC as well, please? Absolutely, Sharon. Our sessions are also going to cover off ORIC responsibilities as well too. You will find that some of the areas that we're talking about here, we will reference ORIC as well too. For those of you that aren't aware of what ORIC is the Office of the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations, specifically covering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community-controlled organisations. Our law firm does work with a lot of ORIC registered agencies, Sharon, as well too. The information I'm going to show you here will also cut across ORIC responsibilities. Next session, I will also specifically reference ORIC information as well too, specifically when we go back and start to look at the core governance and director responsibilities, as well as accountability to members as well too. So that is something we're going to be looking at next week when we look at risk registers, which is obviously important under ORIC, but also membership registers and governance registers as well too. So this is specifically around some of the ACNC governance standards. When we talk of these duties of responsibilities, we will also come back to that as well too. With it, I also acknowledge that the works that do go on with what I'll call Aboriginal community-controlled and Torres Strait Islander community-controlled organisations, some of the specific challenges we will be unpacking, specifically from the governance registrations point of view as well too. And that is something we will reach out to you directly on, Sharon, as well, and other agencies. As we move through these slides, there are areas, and I will address this going back to Sharon's question, that cut across. So things like financial, cybersecurity, engagement with partners. You will find that some of those standards also reference back to ORIC, and these are the areas that we're going to start on today. So thank you, Sharon, for your questions, and by all means, please ask any other questions as we are coming through. Standard 4 talks about suitability of responsible peoples and ensuring a charity must take reasonable steps to be satisfied that its responsible people, such as board members and committee members, are not disqualified from managing a corporation. And also, where this is the case, how do you actually meet this as well too? Duties of responsible people, we will be picking up also what that means and what the duties of those responsible persons actually are, and what information do you need to supply to them in order for board members to be able to discharge their duties. It also means from maintaining and enhancing public trust and confidence in the Australian not-for-profit sector, whereby a charity must take reasonable steps to become a participating non-government institution, and this means that they must essentially address the National Redress Scheme for Institutional Child Sexual Abuse Act under the Commonwealth directives, and also ensure that other directives are also provided. What we will be covering in this as we move forward in the next couple of weeks will be things like how long you actually do your police checks, what happens if a police check does come back with information on it about a director, what about working with children checks as well too, what is the relevant checks that does need to be made with directorships as well. So as we move forwards, some of the key governance areas that we're also seeing is around not just those governance standards, but also key governance requirements that agencies need to look at. So areas, whether you're registered under ASIC, ACNC, and also ORIC, a number of common areas that we are seeing needs to be covered off. And this includes financial abuse, cybersecurity, working with partners, and safeguarding vulnerable people. Now, we are going to unpack those specific topics. I will just take a note and say that under risk management areas, particularly for ORIC registered companies, ACNC and ASIC, they are talking more and more about charities should be in a place of good standards and governance and accountability to manage and reduce the risk of terrorism, finance, fraud, and other forms of abuse. The challenge for many community service organizations when they list these types of directives is how do we actually do this? Now, one of the areas, and I will just jump to this of where we are going to next week, will be around the risk management for agencies. So what we have listed, and I will just jump back, and you will be able to get this as part of the resource that we are opening this up, is what we call the risk register. And this is one of the demo sites that we have. The risk register will in fact give you a list of your risks that you can actually import and export, and we'll actually work through the risk areas. And this is just a sample of how it essentially looks. What you will be able to do is actually go in and actually update this directly yourselves and have this as a working toolkit. But this allows you to manage your risks very effectively, particularly from a governance point of view. But I just do flag that in terms of bringing all of this information together. So let's have a look at some of the key areas that is being flagged newly. We are seeing new legislation, new compliance obligations under 4 specific topics, these being financial abuse, cybersecurity, working with partners, and also supporting vulnerable people. So essentially, when we talk of financial abuse, it is a term that covers a number of issues, including possible instances of bribery, corruption, financial fraud, and improper use or misappropriation of community services funds. A lot of agencies are funded either through state, territory, or Commonwealth departments, and under different funding agreements, we are seeing that they are looking at measures of how your agency essentially complies with these obligations and can provide appropriate due disclosures. It is equally critically important that all charities have an understanding of financial abuse and are confident that they have the knowledge and processes to be able to mitigate these risks and address these issues. Now, one of the questions that agencies do ask is, okay, this is the directive that the regulators provide, like the ACNC. What does this actually mean, and how do we actually measure this? What we have set up in your dashboard is essentially utilizing checklists and also providing further templates that your agency can use. So when you log in, and you can go to your governance, risk, and compliance template, and we've got a checklist here. It is a self-assessment checklist that brings together a lot of the regulatory reporting requirements. So if I click on Add New, then essentially what we've divided this up into, and you can see that I've actually got some further information for adding in comments and the likes. Now, essentially what this allows you to do is answer different questions in a yes or no type field. Now, if I bring this up, and I'll just make this slightly bigger for us to look at, here it is here. Essentially, you can go through and mark it in, let's say, under financial abuse. So essentially, under the compliance obligations that your agency needs to look at is understands its charitable purposes and ensures activities and funding are directed towards these purposes. And it's a yes or no. Essentially, you should be able to answer yes to all of these. It also asks you, has a documented financial risk abuse assessment, and we'll show you that next week. So in this case, we can answer no, and down the bottom, I can add in, this will be reviewed next week. You may also have in your own financial abuse, and you can then measure it against our specific template that we're using. And essentially, we've gone through and looked at things like has a policy that outlines its approach to dealing with financial abuse and has a code of conduct. Now, where this list came from is the different regulators, one of these being the ACNC. And one of the questions that agencies ask us is, okay, we've been asked by the regulators to have a code of conduct. Oops, beg your pardon, have a code of conduct. Or we've got a financial abuse policy. Okay, you might have a policy, but agencies then turn around and say, but is it adequate? Has it met the minimum requirements? Where is the line in the sand even that we need to see? So what you'll find in your dashboard, and this is where we've opened this up just to make it easy as possible, is to look at template policies. And you can actually go in, and we've got the financial security, beg your pardon, here we go here. I'll just share my screen again. So from this dashboard, we've got the Gemba docs. And when we click on that, you'll see that we've got the different folders under the policy sections that you can then access. And these have different templates that you can then use. The idea here is that we've tried to keep compliance, governance, risk, and compliance incredibly simple for your agency to be able to access. With it, the next topic that we find is cybersecurity. And again, the legal compliance direction is that all charities are vulnerable to cybersecurity risks, including unauthorized access to information, hacking, data breaches, viruses, and phishing. Recognizing issues of cybersecurity and how they may affect operations is crucial for all charities. It is just as important that charities know how to best mitigate the risks of cybersecurity and can address these issues that arise. Now, I will add that when the directions are provided, again, agencies say, well, what is the scope? How do we, in fact, measure our cybersecurity requirements? What are we, in fact, asking, and how do we ensure that we can kind of comply with the minimum amount of requirements, and anything above is essentially there and can be met? So again, if you go back to the form that we've come up with as well too, what we've got is not only the directions that are being provided, but also what we have on here is the template. So again, has clear policies, guidelines for procedures for cybersecurity, arranges training for staff and volunteers, has a plan to respond to data breaches as well too. And again, all of these documents are in template form. Another question has come up with these sessions. We are independent to any of the regulatory agencies. We're not providing training on behalf of any of the regulatory agencies. This is information that we are making available to all agencies. We are bringing together a lot of the compliance directions that regulatory agencies are expecting community service organizations to have, and also ensure that you meet the directions moving forwards for your agency. And again, using the checklist will allow you to very simply and easily, you should be able to answer yes to all of these, by the way. And if you can't, then essentially you've got the tools and also the policies to be able to access these as well. And where you can simply find these, again, is by going into the Gemba Docs. If I wanted to have a look at some of the other templates, we've got these here, and you can actually open these up and it'll come up with all the Word documents that you need to see. And it is as simple and as easy as that for you to manage. Again, the other part that you need to measure your compliance again is by working with other partners. And again, the legal compliance directive is that many charities develop working relationship with partners and other charities and other not-for-profit businesses as well too. However, there must be directions, and you must be confident that you're able to have the procedures in place to manage your successful partnerships that you have. The other part that you do also then need to manage is the safeguarding of vulnerable people. And this is particularly important that we've seen with ORIC registered agencies picking up Sharon's point as well too. And that safeguarding is protecting the welfare of human rights of people that are in some ways connected with a charity or its work. And it is a part of a charity's primary duty of care as well. And that's actually quite important to say that it's one of the primary duties of care and direction. So again, what we've actually helped you to do is provide you with the checklist as well too. Someone's just asked, what is the little function in the bottom here? If you do have any questions, you can utilize the chat box here. Our staff are on deck. They can support you. And this is open for yourselves to be able to use. Again, we've divided this into a number of different categories. It very quickly is designed as a yes/no type answer box as well too. It allows you to conduct a quick self-assessment of what you need to be able to do as well too. And quite simply, if I was to go in here, once you're done, you can save the form. And here's the great part of this thing, is that it is open for your agency to be able to use. You can see that it will relay the date that you've got, and you can always go back in and actually edit it as well too. So it allows you to then print off a report. Here it is here. And you can then run this off as part of your reports that you might need to have as well. It is a resource that is there to use, and we will continue to build on this as well. As I mentioned, it has been actually used as part of the COVID works over the last number of years, and we have opened this up to a large number of agencies to support the works that they are doing. As I mentioned, our recommendations quite simply is to look at the governance standards, have a look at the conduct of the self-assessment report. It will allow you to measure very quickly your standing under your governance, risk and compliance work. Next week, we will be looking at risk registers and reporting. This will specifically focus on both ORIC and ACNC registered companies. What it will give you as well too is the capacity to be able to also look at your own risk registers as well. You will be able, if I bring this back to your dashboard, you will find that a risk register button will appear. It'll look something like this down the bottom, and it will also then give you the ability to rank and rate your risks. And you can see here, you can automatically run board reports as you need to. So that said, with it, we will be looking at memberships, directors' duties, and risk registers next week. More than happy to stay online and answer any questions that you might have. If you are watching this recording after today's live session and want to ask us a number of questions, then by all means, please reach out to us on 1300 360 360 or email us at support@gemba360.com.